Is Wellington surviving, thriving, or dying? To debate and discuss, we're joined by BNZ Chief Economist Mike Jones, Business New Zealand Advocacy Director Catherine Beard, and City Councillor Ray Chung.
It's definitely not thriving. I wouldn't like to say that it's dying, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of changes where I definitely think we're heading in the wrong direction. So if we don't turn it around soon, it won't be good for Wellingtonians.
What areas specifically are you focused on?
I would like to actually encourage more businesses to come in here and for them to thrive. They're not having an easy time of it at the moment. There's lots of businesses closing down. All you need to do is walk down Lambton Quay, walk down Manor Street, and you see so many closed shops. It's actually very sad to see Wellington like this.
And that's systemic of cost of living crisis, public sector cutbacks. What do you blame that on?
I don't actually. There's a lot of talk about public service cutbacks, but I don't think that's a major reason, because the numbers that you're looking at are actually not really significant compared to what were here, say, 3 years ago, because there have been a lot of new people coming in. So all it is, it seems to me that it's cutting back some of them. But I think that it's just a general loss of confidence in businesses. Fewer people coming into town. Now, part of that may be working from home, so I think that all contributes to it. But then we should be seeing an equivalent build-up of business in the suburbs, but that's not growing as much as the businesses being lost in Wellington. So,
yeah, look, it does feel a bit downhearted at the moment, and some of that is probably, people are just being careful with their spending, so that will be absolutely part of it. But I think there have been things that haven't gone well for Wellington. So infrastructure and the ability to get around the city easily from the suburbs into the central city is not great. So we've had a lot of investment in things like, cycleways and the Golden Mile and all this kind of thing. But I think businesses are not seeing perhaps the uplift in the public transport investment and the ability of people to get into the city.
What about strong leadership and wisdom? There was a recent letter to the editor which said Wellington was crying out for that. What do you say?
Yeah, look, I think it's not just a Wellington problem, to be honest. I think the way we do local government clearly leaves a lot to be desired around the country, and we've seen, the government's had to put commissioners in to run some councils. So, yeah, I sort of feel like we need to have a more grown-up approach to how we do local government, and maybe a more sophisticated approach and a less political approach.
I think that there is a lack of leadership. We're not heading in the right direction. Now, at the beginning of this triennium, we had a speaker down, Penny Holes from Auckland, and she came down and she told us that there are three types of councillors that she's experienced. The first type is the constituent councillor, second type is the ideology councillor, and the third type is the career councillor. And so I looked around the room and I looked at who we had here, and I thought, well, how many people here are business-minded? How many people have any idea of have any financial acumen, and have any idea about how to actually get business, how to get people to do things? And so I actually find that our council was actually dominated by ideology councillors, and so that's the issue when it comes to getting more business for Wellington, to try and reinvigorate the city.
You are on the council at the moment.
I am on the council
and you're hoping for a second tilt at becoming mayor.
Yes, I am, yes, because I feel that we're just not heading in the right direction.
And what would be your mandate?
I would like to encourage more business to come to Wellington, to make it easier to do business here. The business differential in Wellington now is 3.7, which is they pay 3.7 times the residential rates, and so they're paying a lot of money to be here, but can they actually survive here? And we've seen so many businesses who can't, so they're closing down and moving. And so I want to put in a system where we can actually get them back here, and to encourage them to do better.
What about households as well, who are facing 20% rates bills?
Yes, exactly. And I feel that we shouldn't have these big increases, and I feel that we're just not stopping spending. The council has a culture of spending, and they haven't stopped. If you look at our long-term plan, they haven't taken one thing of substance out of that. We've got enormous things here that are costing hundreds of millions, and we don't need those things now. They're not urgent. We can do them later when we get some money, but to do them now, it means these huge rate increases.
Look, we need to have much better strategic planning, essentially. Skills-based governance, I think, would be way better. Business New Zealand has put out a report asking for a long-term vision for New Zealand. I think that applies to local government as well. It's really, really disruptive and hugely expensive to turn infrastructure projects on and off. So you get a change of council, you get a change of government, everything grinds to a halt. That's really bad for business investment. And ultimately, we spend a lot of money on planning and we don't get delivery. So, where are the tunnels? Where are the roads? Where are more buses, frankly?
Well, how many reports are needed about Wellington, about New Zealand to actually get things done?
Yeah, well, great question. And look, I think this is a discussion whose time has come, and I think more and more people are talking about this. We're seeing more and more councils sort of get into difficulty. Obviously, councils would probably argue rightly they're not being funded for everything that central government's asking them to do. They get a very small amount of the taxpayer money, and so something's got to give there. But, they get more money, they need to be more professional.
Yep, absolutely agree. We're spending a huge amount of money on reports, on business cases. Now, one example that I give is we spent $120 million on a business case for light rail. Now, what did we actually get for that? 2 pieces of A4 paper. And so we spend lots and lots of money looking at how to do things, but never actually doing them. Now, some of those things, of course, can't and shouldn't be done, of course, if the business case doesn't stack up. But we actually need to get out there and say, what can we actually do now? What can we actually afford to do now? What are we going to do now that makes the biggest effect?
Mike Jones, let's bring you in. What do the confidence surveys say about Wellington?
Well, I think if we take a step back for a start, I think it's clear from an economic perspective that we are now down in that particularly nasty part of what has been quite a nasty cycle. Most regions of the economy are feeling it. Increasingly, just about every sector is feeling it. But when we look at the confidence and actually just about every piece of economic data that rolls in at the moment, we are seeing Wellington slip down the rankings to more or less the bottom just about everywhere. So if you look at retail sales, they are going backwards in Wellington at a rate of knots. We're seeing the biggest fall in job ads in Wellington. We're seeing both rents and house prices fall. So some of that, of course, has been expected. Some of it's cyclical, but certainly, Wellington conditions are particularly tough just at the moment.
Is that related to just cost of living, unemployment? What's at play there?
Yeah, like I say, I think part of it's just the broader cycle, and everywhere in the country at the moment is experiencing it to some degree. Certainly, I think there has been a role from pullbacks in public spending, pullbacks in public employment, not just the direct impacts of those changes, of course, but some of the downstream impacts you're seeing on the likes of professional services, construction, retail, housing, etc. And so that's certainly playing into the mix as well. In fact, we're seeing, just growing capacity in parts of the Wellington economy.
Do you think confidence will improve when interest rates come down?
Well, we got a wee taster today, actually. An hour or so ago, we got the latest confidence numbers from the ANZ for July. And actually, we did see quite a decent jump in business confidence, which seems to be related to that dovish pivot from the Reserve Bank that we got a few weeks ago. We would probably just express a little bit of caution around that. I mean, interest rates, there's a lot of speculation that they will fall, but of course the Reserve Bank hasn't got there yet. And when interest rates do fall, it is going to take some time for that to feed through into the rates that people actually pay, businesses and households and so forth. Actually, if you look at the effective mortgage rate just at the moment, the rate that most people are paying, it's still actually rising. So, I think there's some building blocks there that are starting to fall into place around when we might see the cycle start to turn. But I still think we've probably got this air pocket over the next 6 months or so when things, if anything, are going to get a little bit more difficult.
Ray, how does Wellington get up the list in terms of attractive cities to be?
Yes. Obviously, I'm not unaware of the fact that Wellington has actually gone backwards in the last 5 years, and we've actually lost population. So, how do we actually attract people here? I think that it's a combination of things. It's a combination of what they have to do here, the jobs that are available to them here, and I feel confident that jobs are still here. That, those are still there. the cost of renting, the cost of houses here is significant, but I'm not convinced that that's a prime factor for stopping people from coming here. I don't think they'll look at this as, should we actually move to Wellington or should we move to, say, Hamilton? And they'll go where the jobs are. So when they look at where the jobs are, that's the most important thing. That's the key motivator for them to come to Wellington. So once they look at that, then they start looking at the cost of being here. And I think that we still have a good range of housing for sale. It's not that there are no houses for sale. We have problems at the bottom end of the market, at the affordable end of the market, but how do we actually solve that when the cost of building is so high? And we've talked to developers and builders about this, and how can we actually get around that? So the problem is more systemic because we need to actually cut the cost of building, but the council is actually very limited in how we can actually do that.
Are there any centres that Wellington could be looking to for inspiration, Catherine?
Gosh, well, I mean, I think it's a wonderful place. I live in Wellington. It's got a lot going for it. It's got a highly educated workforce. The government is a big employer, and that creates a lot of economic activity. We used to say that Wellington was a smaller version of Melbourne, the cultural capital and great for the arts. I think we should aspire to that. I think we should aspire to grow our cities, actually, because bigger cities have more dynamism. All those costs of servicing things, including your bus routes and your transport and your logistics, it just stacks up a lot better. So I think it's really important that councils do zone for new building opportunities, and that's a combination of density and greenfield. They need to have smart ways of figuring out how to finance that. I think some of those tools will be coming. So I think it's going to be positive.
This letter from Mark Dosser, the letter to the editor, suggested and ended with time to call 0800 Anne Tolly. Is that a last resort or is that a needed resort, do you think, Catherine?
Look, I think if we're having to do 0800 and Tolly too much, we have to look at our model, to be honest. I've kind of felt like, councils, not just Wellington, but around New Zealand, can end up being politicised, and you haven't got a group of people sitting around the table all with a common objective of making it a better and more successful place to be. And so, what do? Do you change up the model and work out other ways to get your community engagement? Because there are different models around the world. I think you can still get public input, And I think it's a bit of a sad statement, really, about local government that the participation rates in voting are so low. You end up with the silent majority sitting there, probably getting frustrated at the direction of travel. Their voice isn't heard, and sometimes the squeaky wheel is what the council's listening to.
Ray, how do you engage more people in local politics?
This is a very good question because we're trying to do that all the time. We keep looking at the numbers, we keep going out and we're talking to people. I have 2 constituent meetings a month, and so I talk to people. I said, what is it that you want in the city? And so how can we actually get people to vote? So I always ask them, did you actually vote in the last election? And so many people come up and say, well, what was the point? I said, well, the point is that if you don't vote, then of course you can't get the people that you want in there. So we've got to encourage people that if they want to see changes, if they're not happy with what's happening in the city, then we have to get them to vote. We have to get them to look at the candidates and say, choose someone who has the same values that you do.
Mike, have you ever considered moving to Wellington?
I lived there for 10 years, Jono, and even though I suppose am an Aucklander these days, I would move back were it not for the weather.
Given your experience in both cities, in Wellington and Auckland, what differences, similarities have you noticed?
Look, they are quite different. I mean, Wellington city centre at least is obviously quite compact, whereas Auckland is sort of a city that seems to be more lived in the suburbs. Auckland does have a bit more of a big city feel than Wellington, which is obviously both good and bad. I really, for me, enjoyed the open spaces in Wellington, the bush in and around the harbour and so forth. Obviously, big, if I bring it back to my profession, big differences around the economic makeup of the cities as well. And look, for Auckland, I suppose, at the moment, being slightly more diversified in terms of the sectors that are here probably helps in a downturn. Obviously, Wellington is very orientated towards services and government, which, given both of those areas are under pressure at the moment, probably isn't helping at this point in the cycle.
Ray, what could Wellington learn from Auckland then? about diversification?
I actually wrote a letter to the Sunday Star Times just recently about an article that Wayne Brown actually wrote, and he said that people were asking him, how did you actually get to keep the rate increase in Auckland to 6%? And so why is it that the rest of the country have got sort of double-figure rate increases, but Auckland's managed it? And so then he explained some of the things that he'd been doing, and I looked at those things, and it really gave me a lot of encouragement for exactly what we need to do here. We need to cut out the things that don't matter. We need to cut out the things that can be delayed until later. But we look at our budgets, we look at our long-term plan and think, we can still have everything on it. Well, we can't have everything. We're just borrowing more and more. We're running out of things to sell, and so we really need to start living beyond with the available revenue that we actually have. Standard & Poor's gave a report on Wellington last year, and they said exactly this. Wellington is spending too much money, and you're not bringing in enough revenue. So you either have to fix one of those things or fix them both. So that's what we need to focus on. We need to stop spending.
I think, that's a huge challenge because we've got, obviously 100-year-old pipes that are leaking all over the place. So there's a whole lot of deferred maintenance that hasn't happened. So, but that's prioritisation. And so we do need to do smart spending as well. And so this is where I think, that we need to have some better revenue sharing ideas between central and local government, because I think the local government model financially doesn't work. But again, you need councils to be doing the basic stuff and doing it well. Nobody wants to spend money on the piles on their house. They'd rather have a new kitchen, but if you don't have good piles, the house is going to fall down. So I think getting back to basics is important, but I think, if you're in business in Wellington, particularly retail, you want people to be able to get into your shop, and you want to make that easy, and it's actually not that easy.
Mike, what do the economic indicators say about Wellington in the next 12, 18 months?
Well, in the short term, they're not saying anything particularly pretty. As I said, I think for not just Wellington, but the broader economy, we're facing into a bit of an air pocket over the next 6 months in terms of going through that nasty, gritty part of the cycle. Look, I think, though, as the cycle does turn and we look into a recovery next year, Wellington will certainly be part of that. Now, will it participate as much as some of the other sectors? I probably still have my doubts. I think Wellington probably is set for a period of underperformance relative to some other parts of the country, but it still will recover, just like everywhere else. I think, as you alluded to earlier, as interest rates come down and the Reserve Bank releases pressure off the economy, we will start to see conditions and confidence improve.
Ray, how do you sell an underperforming local economy in an election year, local election?
I think we have to make it easier. We have to look at what are the things that attract anyone to Wellington, to bring a business to Wellington, to come and live in Wellington. So we need to look at those things and say that these are the things that we need to focus on. One of the things that, as Catherine mentioned, is about the leaking pipes. And when you pick up a newspaper and always see a leaking pipes, another burst pipe somewhere, another geyser somewhere else, it's not enticing people to come here. So absolutely right that we need to fix that infrastructure. We need to fix those leaks. We need to concentrate on the things that only the council can do. That is the infrastructure, encouraging the transport to work well so that people can get around, and trying to keep the costs down. And so it's almost like we're actually encouraging, we're actually contributing to the increase in cost by having these huge rate increases. We should be looking at what the central government is doing and say we should be tightening our belts as well. We want to, we should be feeling the pain or going through this as well as everyone else. But we're not. So this is what we need to do.
Look, I think Wellington is a great place to live and work. We need some good management, and we need some long-term strategic thinking, We don't want zigzags from councils. We don't want councillors sitting around the table arguing with each other. And we've got to have a place where people can get around easily. And at the moment, some of our suburbs are actually really hard to move through.
For more content just like this and all the latest business and political news, head over to mbr.co.nz.